Genshin Impact has been out for quite a while now, and if you've been following the game since the very start, it has been a very long journey for you guys, and come along with a lot of patches are obviously the characters, which plays a very integral part of the game. Now, sometimes investing into those characters are, just mainly for fun, and if you love those characters, you're going to be investing into those. But many of the time, considering the meta for clearing some of the end game content is also pretty much important for your account, because those do actually get you quite a lot of free Primogems, and it does stack up over the patches, which is why we're going to be having today's video looking into some of the early investment that you can give to your characters that actually transform your account. Some of these you actually only need to invest into a few characters and your account is already immensely different, so that it becomes the most efficient use of your resources, especially if you are somebody who tend to actually swipe your credit card into the game. Zelina is here, and she's an amazing character that we all want to pull, but the god of Hoyoverse decided to bless me with Dia, leaving me devastated. But thanks to Loot Bar, the goddess of Primogems, allowing me to top up at a discounted price, I finally managed to get Zelina. So if you're planning to swipe for pooling, then don't forget to check out Loot Bar. If you know me, I've been recommending you guys Loot Bar before, since you can always save almost a 20% on all of your top-ups. With over 100,000 orders and so many good reviews at this point, you can be sure that Loot Bar is trustworthy. Here you can see my order receipts of all of my top-ups that I have done. So guys, be sure to check out Loot Bar through the link in my description, as it can be a great way for you to save your money, especially if you are topping up a large amount. Now, when investing into Constellations, usually how I would recommend it is that, technically speaking, investing into the character's signature weapons usually is something that you would want to focus on first before you think about going for their Constellations, because most of the time, signature weapons is designed to focus on buffing a lot towards those characters, and especially when Hoyoverse has already changed and improved the pity system of the weapon banner, making it a lot easier for you guys to actually get the weapon that you want nowadays. It would generally be better for you to focus on the weapon first before you go for the Constellations. However, the focus of today's video is the Constellation, which is why we're going to be focusing on that. And first off, we're going to be looking into towards support character Constellations, and I would say generally support character cons are the Constellations that we will focus on you investing into most efficiently, because when you have these Constellations, it will affect basically all of your team comps that has these support characters. It is very easy to use, unlike DPS character Constellations where you are stuck with that specific DPS. Support character Constellation is very useful in earlier or even late parts of the game Constellation investment if you don't have a lot of resources to spend on trying for Constellations. So the very first character I would recommend you to focus on for the Constellation is, well, definitely going to be Shilonen, our most updated character in terms of support, and overall considered to be the best support in the game right now in terms of how easy it is for you guys to use her. And then of course, if you do actually invest more into her Constellations, most of your team comps, apart from the element that she doesn't buff, which is Anemo and Dendro, is overall going to be increased. The first Constellations is okay. I would say the main majority of the things you're going to be focusing on that Constellation is going to be the resistance to interruptions, but it is also a pretty nice thing because most of the support character doesn't actually give you this, unless of course you are using a geo support character that provides you slightly bit of shield, or other support character that has a bit of shielding in their kit. But overall, many of the resistance to interruption comes with the specific DPS character kit, so having a C1 like this is rather nice. Now, the more important Constellation for Shilonen is definitely going to be her C2, which is something that you would like to focus in and aim for if you're using her in most of your teams, because as you can see, every of the element that she has been able to buff now gets some additional buffing from that. So what Shilonen C2 basically does is that you're always going to have a geo resistant shred up at all times, as well as the 50% damage increase for geo characters. So overall, if we're looking at it right now, Shilonen's now becomes basically one of the best geo support character out there, obviously alongside with Goro. Para attack increase is rather okay, considering that this is a little bit too much much attack from what I may be able to see, because Pyro Resonance already gives you a pretty nice attack increase. Not to mention, many of the time Pyro character would like to have a Bennett on their team, which is also an attack increase, which is why it tends to have a bit of a diminishing return. However, overall that's still very good. Now, Hydro maximum HP increase is one of the most significant things that we're going to be having, because Hydro character is one of the most used character nowadays. Hydro element is very popular, one of the best elements in the game, I would say right now, if not the best element. To have an extra 45% HP increase is practically pretty significant for them. Cryo crit damage increased by 60%, really nice, but we haven't been using Cryo character for a very long time. But overall, if you're still using Cryo character, then yeah, it's very good. And then for Electro character, this is very interesting because now you're going to be having a lot more burst uptime. So, I mean, up until this point, I think there are too many characters that can utilize this, other than, Raiden, Cloran, and Kuching. I mean, some of it comes down to, Sino, and obviously every other Electro character can make use of this as well. But I think if you're using characters such as Cloran and Kuching, I think they would have a bit of fun to their gameplay, because now they can actually spam their burst a lot more, because those two characters tend to already have a low burst cooldown. And obviously your Raiden Shogun is going to have a lot more on-field time, which is kind of nice. So for overall value, Shilonen C2 is very good. Up next, we obviously have our Kazuya. Kazuya is still one of the best support character out there as well, alongside with Shilonen, because while technically speaking you can use both of these characters on some of the team comps you can use out there, and if you're using Shilonen one side, Kazuya is still going to be there for your support. The Kazuya C1 is okay. It does allow him to have another E skill right after he uses his elemental burst, so this actually helps him to reduce his energy burst cost a little bit, but it also helps you to swirl extra elements depending on how you use him. A little bit hard to use, and his C1 isn't too much of a significance. However, if you're looking into his C2, this is one of the best constellation out there in the game, especially if you're using him in an elemental reaction teams, because the 200 elemental mastery increase is basically equivalent to a Sucrose at C6 if I'm not wrong, but now it has a lot more duration to itself. And on top of that, Kaza also has an extra EM increase when he uses his burst as well, which is not only good for his damage output, but also this counts into his EM build towards his elemental damage increase for your whole team, making it a lot easier for you to hit that 1000 EM cap, and then able for you to focus a little bit more into building other stats for your Kazuya. Other than that, we have Furina's Constellations. Now, Furina at C0 isn't technically that good of a character, like many of the players out there have been saying. Now, I'm not, downplaying Furina here, because Furina is literally one of my most favorite character in the game, and I actually have her at C3. So I have been using her a lot, and I know very well how Furina actually works. Now, the reason why C0 Furina isn't as good as you might think is because even though she has a lot of damage increase for your whole team and good sub DPS power, however, in order for you to get the maximum damage increase, it actually takes time, and sometimes if you don't have sufficient healing, you won't even be able to get to that maximum damage increase for your team, unlike Shilonen or Kazuya, which access to instantly maximum buffing whenever they cast their skill or their burst. Furina at C0 doesn't really have that benefit for you, but overall it's not as if C0 Furina is that bad, because you still get that damage increase and her sub DPS power, so she's still one of the better support sub DPS character out there in the game for you. However, if you have her Constellations, that changes things. Now at C1, you basically get some more extra damage increase from Furina, because now her fanfare limit increase, and you get an instant 150 fanfare whenever you cast her burst as well, which helps charge up your stack pretty much faster. However, Furina technically reaches her maximum potential whenever she hits C2, because once you hit C2, you basically instantly have your maximum damage increase from Furina whenever she casts her burst. Most of the time, you only need like a single healing from your healer in the team, and you're already at the maximum of her stack, and then from there on, any of the extra stack or fanfare points she's going to have is going to be increasing her maximum HP to 140% maximum HP increase, which is really nice in terms of her damage output, considering that she is a sub DPS character. So not only is your overall team damage, it's going to get a 18 seconds duration of all of her bursts. It also get the fanfare limit increase or the damage increase cap from her C1, and now she also gets her maximum HP increase, therefore her sub DPS damage increase, not to mention that Furina also get the buff from her burst also, which is overall making her one of the best sub DPS character out there if you have her C2. And overall, yeah, I wouldn't say a must have, but once you get a Furina at C2, basically all of your team would want to have Furina on there. So C2 is a very, very powerful Constellations. Now, since I already have Furina at C3, I might as well also talk a little bit about it to share my experience of owning a C3 Furina. Now, if you're pulling C3 for Furina damage increase, you'll be a little bit disappointed because it doesn't really increase her damage directly, but it does increase your other team members' damage by quite a lot, making her even more of an important character whenever you're finding a good support sub DPS character for your account. Now, obviously, investing her to a C3 Furina and on top of her weapons as well does cost a lot. It has cost me basically a whole year of Primogems savings in order for me to get a C3 Furina. So, you know, it's only for somebody who love Furinas out there. But other than that, if you do have the ability to invest into a C2 Furina, and that's already very good. Moving on, we have one of the most popular Hydro character out there, Yelan. Now, I'm sure till this point, most of the account already have Yelan. I'd be very surprised if any of the account who has been playing for a long time doesn't have Yelan, because Yelan is just a very much powerful all-around character for you to have. Not only does she have access to damage increase during her burst, but also her sub DPS power is very, very good. Now, her C1, if you look at face value, many would disregard her C1. However, her C1 is actually more powerful than you think. Now, in battle, it means that her energy recharge level will decrease a bit because now you're getting more elemental particles, so it's kind of like you having a sack sword on Xingqiu. That's one thing. But if you didn't realize, Yelan E skill actually do a pretty big deal of damage if you invest into her E skill talent, and especially when she does vaporize damage, this E skill actually is pretty insane. Not only that, it can do AoE damage as well, right? Because she can tag your enemies, so that's pretty good. However, if you're in the overworld, this is also pretty good because you already know how long of an E skill duration and speed Yelan has access to whenever she's in her E skill. So if you have an extra E skill, it will allow you to travel across regions a lot faster, especially when you're in the Sumeru Desert, which is one of my worst places to be in. So having Yelan E skill out there does help. However, one of the best constellation for Yelan comes in whenever she hits C2, because now it provides an additional water arrow every other burst wave for hers, which has a set scaling of 14% Yelan max HP, so additional damage first of all. However, the more important thing is that C2 Yelan Hydro application is a lot better compared to her C0 and C1, which now she has enough Hydro application to sustain character like Wu Tao, Xiangling, or even Alekino to do their vaporize damage, unlike C0 or C1, making it a lot easier for you to play her as a sole Hydro character on the team, which is kind of something that Yelan tends to be on, because not always you have two Hydro character on your team to actually sustain the Hydro applications. Other than that, we also have our Nahida. Our lovely Nahida has just been back, which is also a perfect TAM for you to invest into it, especially if you are more focusing on using a Dendro team. Now, her C1s is okay. It's you know, the usage of it can varies depending on which team you use. So the increase toward a C1 Nahida isn't really apparent or, you know, sustainable all the time. However, when she hits C2, everything changes quite a bit, because this is an extremely significant damage increase to most of Nahida's team. The only team comps I can say that doesn't have a lot of buff toward this is going to be Burning and Bergian, because you don't use Burning Reaction a lot, and Bergian team isn't really that popular as well. However, that doesn't matter because most of the team comps that Nahida's in for a Dendro team comps, which are, you know, Bloom, Hyper Blooms, Aggravate as well as Spread, those teams get a significant damage boost, and that's all you need to care about if you are using a Dendro team. Obviously, that doesn't count toward, you know, Kinich or Emily, who is the character that specifically works in burning reactions, which I really do enjoy. That's where it's a perfect place for us to switch to Emily a bit. Now, Emily, it's currently an underrated character. Obviously, her usage has shot up quite a lot when Kinich has arrived, because when she was released, there weren't too many characters that was able to use Emily on their team, so she wasn't popular, but it changes whenever Kinish come. Now, I value Emily a lot, and I really like her playstyle because whenever I see a character that focuses a lot on a single reactions, like, you know, for example, Nilou Bloom team or Chevrolet's Overload team building, I generally really like to invest into those characters. Because, well, one thing, whenever you hit the end game, you do want to have a little bit of more team comps to play around with. So Emily is also a perfect character for you to more invest into, especially in the end game. And I would almost guarantee you that since Hoyoverse is already building her as a burning reaction character, more character that will be able to work on a burning team will come in the future as well. If you invest into Emily, you will see your return on investment later on as well. Now, her C1 is a rather good increase to her overall damage. So if you already invested into her weapons, C1 is also a rather good stopping point. However, once you hit her C2 as well, an extra dendro resistance decrease is obviously a very nice thing for you to have on an Emily. Now, obviously, that is going to take you a lot of investment toward your burning reaction team, which is really nice. Now, talking about Emily C2, I cannot go without talking about a bit on Nilou C2 constellations as well. Now, Nilou technically only works on her team comps, but if you have Nilou as C2, I don't think any team on your account is going to be beating Nilou Bloom team anytime soon, because you're not only getting hydro resistance decrease on your enemy, but also a freaking dendro resistance, all of which is a 35% decrease. So this is a very, very powerful thing. However, Nilou and Emily constellation investment is a lot more niche, which is why I recommend them at the bottom of the support character constellation investment. Now, if you want to look into even more niche, we're going to be touching on DPS character constellation, and this is where we're going to be touching on some of the constellation that also has a lot of impact on your account. Obviously, if you main the DPS character that we're going to be mentioning, that is very good, but even if you don't, then still investing into these character constellation will also yield you an insane result, because the constellation that we're going to be talking about changes these character performance quite significantly. And first off, we're going to be touching on Alekino. Now, we already know how good of a character Alekino is. C0, very, very good already. I'd say she does quite more damage to our lovely Hu Tao out there, but a little bit more tougher for you to play around because, while she can die pretty easily. However, once you start touching on her constellation, she's going to be so far ahead of your Hu Tao that I actually feel sorry for her, because Hoyoverse, I have no idea why they designed her constellation to be, oh my god, insanely good, that she gets so much better in most of her constellations. It's actually insane. So first off, we have her C1, which is obviously a very good stopping point in most of your accounts as well, especially once you already got her specific weapons, because now her normal attack has an increase of 100% in their value, and on top of that, she also has access to resistance to interruption. Now, Alekino tends to get interrupted quite a bit if you don't have her C1, but the damage increase in her C1 for a normal attack is pretty significant, which is why Alekino C1 is one of the constellation C1 that has the most value towards you out there in the game, because as you have seen before for support character, many of which you start to see a significant increase once you hit C2. For Alekino, you only need her C1 as already an insane increase for your damage wise, well, not to mention her C2. Well, now if you have a C2, I think it's basically a stopping point for her already. You probably never have to invest into another DPS character in a very long while, because C2 just makes Alekino to be a lot more flexible when you're playing around with her, because you don't need to have that basically 5 second-ish of waiting time for E skill to cook. But now she also becomes quite a new character as well, as that 900% front load AoE pyro damage that does a ton of damage to your surrounding enemies is a very good thing for her, especially in AoE situation as well. So yeah, I don't have to discuss a lot about this because it is very, very good. Moving on, we have our Neuvillette. Now, this is probably a no-brainer because of how good Neuvillette is. Now, for overall value constellations, I still feel that Alekino constellation value investment is still a lot better than Neuvillette, because Alekino constellation, on top of damage wise, it also adds to quality of life as well. While for Neuvillette, you can actually, make a way for it to be utilized, and his constellation only allows you to easier get there, right? Because his C1 just allows you to get his maximum draconian stack a lot more, as well as interruption to resistance, all of which can be countered by either you having a slight bit of shield with Zhongli and you building him in a team of 3 different characters for him to get a maximum draconian stacks, as well as his C2, right? You get a maximum of 42% crit damage increase, which overall is very nice and make use of a C1 very well. So yes, C1 and C2 constellation for Neuvillette out there obviously is still one of the better constellation for DPS character for you to invest in, and making him a very powerful DPS that most of the other character won't be able to compare with. However, again, as I've mentioned, you can make a way to actually work around some of this constellation of his, which is definitely going to be down to your decision making. Other than that, we also have Mulanni. Now Mulanni is one of the characters that actually surprised me a lot because Mulanni is an insane character, guys. He is a lot harder to play if you don't know how to use her properly compared to Neuvillette. And I think Neuvillette is probably the easiest DPS character that you have in the game. Hands down, I don't think Hoyoverse is going to be creating any other easier DPS character like Neuvillette anytime soon. But in terms of damage wise, Mulanni does insane numbers. If you have a weapon and also if you invest into her C1, Mulanni already do very good number at her C0, but C1 significantly increase her damage as well. So if you're a character that mains Mulanni, love her playstyle, you can play around with her a lot, C1 instantly increase her damage to very nice, a very nice stopping point for Mulanni investment, as well as obviously her other constellation is very good too, but the increase from her C0 and C1 is quite a lot for her, which is why I'm recommending here for you guys. Other than that, an interesting consideration as well is going to be towards Lyney. Now, probably he's not a character that you guys would think I have on this list here. However, many of us actually underrates Lyney, especially once it comes to his constellation. A C0 Lyney is okay, even if he'll have his weapon as well, right? He does pretty nice damage, but the downside of Lyney is that the longer the rotations or the longer the battle goes, the less value he's going to have, because you need quite a lot of setup and resistance to interruption for Lyney. However, his constellation technically fixed that for you, because once you get into his constellation, he becomes such an insane character at nuking character that most of the time your enemies weren't even able to do anything towards you. So basically C1 adds an additional hat if you use 4 or more charge attack per rotation. So basically now Lyney can have 2 Grim Malkin hats present at once. Usually he only has 1, and you already know how insane damage his Grim Malkin hat can actually do. Right now, if you have 2, that basically doubles the damage from his Grim Malkin cat. Well, not to mention, if you really love Lyney and you decide to invest into Constellation even more, C2 is a perfect stopping point for you, because oh my god, an extra 60% crit damage. Hello, C1 already gave you like double Grim Malkin hat damage. Now you get an extra 60% crit damage onto that number. Yeah, right. I don't have a C2 test for you guys here, but if you go on the internet, YouTube, and you search up a C1 or C2 Lyney showcase, I think you would be moderately surprised at how good of a character he can be in terms of nuking your enemies. Other interesting considerations, if you love, Kinich, then yes, Kinich Constellation is very good. Now, Kinich investment is something that you need to think about as well, because Kinich love to have Emily. So generally speaking, if you are investing into a Kinich, I would tend to recommend you to invest into your Emily overall first, unless you love Kinich, of course, because his constellations is actually pretty insane as well. I actually don't know what Hoyoverse is cooking when they were coming up with Kinich constellations, because now at C1 he has an extra 100% crit damage increase in his skill pike cannon, which is obviously the most important part of his kit. I think this is one of, if not the highest crit damage increase that we have in any of the constellations, so that is practically pretty insane. At his C2, he additionally have the ability to Dendro resistant shred. Not to mention, his first cannon shot after he uses his E skill has a 100 damage increase as well, making him a very potent nuker as well. So honestly, I don't know what to say about this, because if you do investing into constellations, it's going to do some pretty insane number, but obviously it comes down to whether or not you do decide or not. So those are some of the main constellation investment I have been recommending to you guys. I do have a few other honorable mentions that I want to touch on here, which is first going to be Navia's constellation. Now overall, Navia has seen a lot of buff over the patches, especially after Shilonen has been introduced as well, because Navia team love to have Shilonen, right? Navia constellation is actually okay. It's just basically quality of life increase for her. So C1, you know, in number calculation, she's gonna lower her burst cost from 60 to around 40 to 42 energy requirement, which is quite a nice burst requirement lowering considering how important her elemental burst tends to be. Now her C2 is also a pretty good stopping point for her. It does give her a 36% crit rate boost. On paper, it seems like an okay for a C2. However, considering Navia is a nuke E skill attacker, right? All of her damage focus on one E skill, or you know, maybe two. So in order for her to get the maximum potential, it's always important for her to crit, right? If you don't crit, you're missing out on a ton of her DPS. So C2 is actually rather very important because first of all, you can obviously build more crit that way, but also allow you to build more crit damage onto her, which obviously overall pretty nice. Other than that, an interesting options that you can take into consideration if you don't have any other character to look into is probably going to be Xianyun. Xianyun is a very interesting character because of the fact that she allows you to open up team comps that you don't normally have, right? Plunging attack team comps. Up until now, there's only Xiao and Garmin who focuses mostly on plunging damage. However, obviously Xianyun allows all of your character to have plunging, and some other character, you know, like Hu Tao actually has a very high plunging attack multiplier. Therefore, plunging Hu Tao is a very, very good team to play around with. Or, you know, for me, for example, I use like Kuching, or, you know, D-Loop can also do plunging gameplay style, right? Those kind of character can open up team comps and other, you know, DPS character as well. If you look into Xianyun Constellation, it is pretty nice. But C1 in the battle basically allows her to get more energy regen. However, if it's outside of the battle, you already know how good of a character Xianyun can be when it comes to, you know, climbing the mountains or you're traveling very far distances. If you do have two of this, it's pretty fun. I do have a C1 Xianyun. She's very fun to move around with. I really like her a lot. However, if you're looking into a C2 Xianyun, very good stopping point for her. But her C2 just actually do a lot because now your plunging damage is just going to skyrocket to like a very, very nice amount, making most of the other character doing plunging damage can sometimes even make up for, you know, their other normal attack damage as well. Obviously, you have to do the math and I have to look a lot into it. But my point is that Xianyun just opened up a lot of nice team options for you, which is really great. And then another character, she already dropped in popularity because she is a cryo character and cryo buffer. But if you're still looking into cryo teams, then Shenhe value is still pretty much there. Generally speaking, Shenhe at C0 is not technically complete. It's a little bit hard to play around with because one E skill, your rotation to craft around that, you have to maximize it to, you know, the very, very maximum amount if you're going to be able to play Shenhe optimally. However, if you invest into your Shenhe and then you have C1, it's going to be a lot easier for you because now you technically have two E skill to have your team a lot easier when it comes to rotation, or you can just use double E skill in one time, you know, the hold and tap option, so that you have both of the buff from her E skill, which is kind of nice. You want to invest a lot more into her, then C2 is rather good because now her elemental burst has an 18-second uptime and your cryo character within the field has an extra 50%, you know, crit damage increase, which is overall pretty nice. And well, for me, I was kind of like, you know, really in love with cryo character back then, so investing into a C3 Shenhe and I have an extra 3 talent level of her elemental skill. But at the end of the day, again, right, cryo character is something that you really have to like them in order for you to invest in. So it's always going to be coming down to your decision. Now, interestingly, a very, very unpopular character is going to be Sichuan. Now, why is she here on my honorable mention list? Is that even though Sichuan in most of the cases is not going to be good, but there are technically 2 cases at this point in time where I can see that she can do pretty decently in. First of that is if you're using a team that have a lot of off-field elemental skill damage, you know, like Fischl, Yai Miko, Urina, those characters are going to be loving Sichuan. That's one thing. However, Sichuan is more of a character that's going to be working in a mono hydro team because overall, if you're looking into it, she's rather a character that you would want to have on, you know, Furina and a Neuvillette team. Therefore, if you're running like, for example, Furina, Neuvillette, Sichuan, another character of your choice, I think that's going to be an okay. However, if you're looking into her constellation, her C1 allow you to have basically an increase into your E skill damage. However, her C2 is pretty nice if you have like so much Primogems that you don't really have anywhere else to invest in and you love Sichuan as a character. character, then the hydro resistance decrease is rather nice overall, which is why I did mention that. Shishuin, in most of the cases, she's bad, but when you're using her in a mono hydro team, then yes, she's going to be able to help you in a way that not many other characters have access to, which is your E skill damage increase, and with C2 it's going to be hydro resistance decrease. So those guys I would say are the honorable mention that I've got right now, which I would say is going to be off my list. So I hope that the list have been able to potentially have a more good decision making on your future pools, or you know, have a good Primogems saving plan, so that once some of these characters actually returns, you have enough Primogems to basically invest into their constellations to help your account, especially when you're feeling that your account is newer and you're struggling with to clear the abyss, or you know, our lovely Imaginarium theater. If you do have any comment or discussion point, feel free to leave it down in the comment section, and I or some other lovely Genshin Impact player will get to you there. Once again guys, if you are planning to invest into your account, yes, you are missing out on your Primogems, don't forget to check out loot bars. I'm sure it's going to be help you out a lot. If you're new to the channel guys, don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me till this part of the video guys, and with that I wish you a super day, and I will catch you on my next video.